Hey, FIFO here, and today we're going to look at reaction diffusion. Let's jump right in. And here I am, inside the computer. Okay, close this. So, what is reaction diffusion? Before diving into the details, let me show you the next visual, which might look familiar to you. You can see these nice organic patterns that will fill up the space but won't intersect with each other. Actually, I got really obsessed with these structures, and they are the reason I started learning Houdini in the first place. But that's a story for another video. If you look closely into nature, you will find these patterns basically everywhere. In animal skin, in mussels, in fishes, in corals, just to name a few. But what is it? Reaction diffusion is a process that models how substances, chemicals, even cells, spread and interact in a medium over time. It combines those two key phenomena, reaction, where the substances interact chemically to transform into different substances, and diffusion, where substances spread out due to concentration differences. And these processes together can create those complex patterns that we all love. To illustrate this further, let's jump into Photoshop. Okay, here we are inside Photoshop. I opened up a nice and clean new file. We will start by taking a brush and we make it black, increase the size a bit, and then we start clicking around in the file. And these clicks will basically mimic our two substances. The black areas is substance A, and the white area around it is substance B. So, reaction diffusion. Let's start a bit counterintuitively with the second part, the diffusion part, because it's the most easy in Photoshop. And therefore we take the Gaussian blur here, and we will just blur it by 10 pixels. Hit apply, and we are granted with this blurred view of the image. That's the diffusion part, but how we make it react. So the two substances react with each other, and this can be achieved by applying a high-pass filter. So we're interested in those areas where those substances react with each other. And this filter allows us to find exactly those areas, those edges we are interested in. So hit apply, and it doesn't look so great yet. The only thing we are left to do with is by cranking up the contrast to really make those edges pop. So this can be achieved by just cranking the values in here. So we do this until we are just left with a black and white image. And here we go. Hit apply. And these steps are basically everything it needs for our reaction diffusion. Ideally, we would put them into an action in Photoshop, which I already prepared. You can see here. So we have the Gaussian blur, the diffusion part, we have the high pass filter, and we crank up the contrast. By having this into one action, we can just spam the play button, and over time you will see those nice and organic patterns evolving. And they grow and grow, they won't intersect, but they will take up eventually all the space in the file. I love how it looks and how these structures grow. I could watch it all day long. This is basically everything that it takes to make those structures grow. But FIFO, I clicked on this video to see how to do it in Houdini. I gotcha. Let's jump into Houdini and recreate this in Copernicus. Okay, here we are inside a new instance of Houdini. I just created a GeoNode. Let's dive in and let's get ourselves this Copernicus node. We are just interested in the new one, not the old stuff. Here we are. We dive inside this one and we are granted with the new Copernicus view. The first thing I would like to do is crank up the resolution. Let's start with like a 2K texture size here. And we need something to work with. I chose to start with a noise. It can be the 2D, can be 3D. Let me, oh yeah, it's already set to the front view in the viewport. Yeah, maybe we crank up the contrast a bit to get a bit more of those structures. Remember in Photoshop, we just started with dots that we placed in an empty file. So yeah, let's crank it up a bit. Let's maybe turn this one down a bit. And yeah, maybe we go for the good old Perlin noise. A little bit bigger, like this. That looks good to me. Okay, how do we implement the reaction diffusion in here? Remember, in Photoshop, we started with the diffusion part because this was the easiest. So let's do the same here. Let's drop down a blur and let's connect it, highlight it, and let's give this maybe 0.1, a little bit more blur. The second step was we wanted to find those edges around the areas. There is this find edges node here, edge detect, but I had weird results with it. Maybe you guys make it work, but I show you the route that I took. It was basically a little hack. I ended up blurring the same image again, but just by a factor of 4. So the second instance is blurred 4 times more than the first one. Afterwards, just to be on the safe side, I clamped both of the outputs to be sure that we are just working in this 0 to 1 range, and I subtracted both of them from each other. Put down the subtract node via in the first clamp in the background, the second option in the foreground, and we subtracted from each other. What we are granted with is those little islands, and in our Photoshop example, we cranked up the contrast of those islands. I did this with a multiply constant in here because this node comes with this neat little brightness feature, which I ended up cranking up to 4 as well. We're not quite there yet. We have still some grayish areas, and then Photoshop, we really were left with just black and white values. So I clamped this again. I don't necessarily think this is needed, but I did it. After that, I used a node that is called compare, because what this node can do is it can compare it to a certain value. In my case, that was 0.1, and I just wanted to know where A, our white part, is greater than B. And now you can see we have basically just our really inner areas of those things where we just had the white values. Okay, once we've done this, we can almost already see those patterns, but the only thing left to do is repeating this step over and over again after 2 iterations. We need to do this a lot, so I will now make it 4, and ultimately I would probably go for 8. We don't need too many like in Photoshop, but we need some. So if I click here, we can already see it gets much rounder, way more organic, and over time those patterns will really smooth out and create this very nice looking organic shapes. If you ask me, I'm really obsessed with those patterns. What I ended up doing was I selected everything, right click, and I put this into a subnet, of course with the output so we can see it. Maybe I put a output in here like this. Now I should be able to see it? Yeah, there we go. So we have our output. We can even rename this Reaction-Diffusion. Now we can chain those together. These are 16 iterations. We can even have 32 or 64. And more than this just takes a ton of time to compute. Crank this up to 64 and let's see the outcome here. And yeah, here you go. Here you can see those nice structures, very round, very smooth, very organic. Yes, it's a lot of chaining together. You can switch the inputs. Maybe we play around with the noise a little bit. Let's split up this vector and maybe we stretch it out to one side. Maybe let's give it a length of 10 in one direction. So we should see very long patterns, very organic, almost like cell structures of leaves or like in the bark of a tree. Yeah, I think you saw those structures a lot in nature, but now you know how to recreate them. If all this chaining was a little bit too much for you, I created already a digital asset called Reaction-Diffusion Cops. You can just place this down, and in here you can start from an input. You can even use a mask, your file, or you also can start with a noise. You can show just the input noise in here. You can use a mask. You can do endless growth, limit growth. You can adjust the number of iterations. So here you can see I did a lot of wiring. It will lead to very smooth results, but it takes a lot of time to compute. So usually I would recommend go with 1632. It's way faster just to get the preview. And this details in here is basically the strength of those blurs. So this initial value. So yeah, let's go with 0.1, a higher number. You can play around with that. And once you put this, we can disable show the input and you can see the result in here. If we crank it up to maybe 64, those structures should grow more, evolve more over time. You see it fills all those little empty spots. What's the cool thing with it is I already built in a scale function, so you can adjust the size, you can output different kind of maps directly from it, colorize it, maybe with like the Twilight preset. There you go, and you can use it instantly in a shader. I think I just picked a very bad preset here. So let's do that. So you can just output the double lines. I think can also lead to some super cool motion graphic kind of structures. Put this onto your objects, use it in a bump map, use it in a displacement map. Get creative with it. And yeah, if you're interested in that and it was too much wiring for you, you can jump over to my Gumroad. There I uploaded this digital asset. It's for free. Of course, I would highly appreciate a little contribution here. But in general, enjoy the tool. I hope it streamlines your process. You can get creative with Reaction-Diffusion. If you enjoy this kind of content, please leave a like, subscribe, and don't miss out on the future things. We will see each other in the next one. Stay curious. Bye bye.